Hi, my name is Fallon, and I'm here today with Chegg Tutors to talk to you about identifying bias in probability and statistics. Identifying bias in data collection is very important in designing experiments, especially in the early steps, because if there's bias in research or data collection, then that bias can render the collected data useless. Bias is defined as any systematic error that results in the collected data differing from the true population data. So bias occurs whenever what is sampled is different from or not representative of the entire population. There are a few different kinds of bias. The two most commonly discussed are selection bias and measurement bias. Selection bias can include non-representative sampling or non-representative bias, where the sample that is chosen is not representative of the entire sample. So, for example, picking only people whose name starts with an A would create non-representative sampling bias because that unless the population that you're studying is only people whose names start with A, then that creates a biased picture of the population based on just those people. Another form of selection bias is non-response bias. So that one is affected by the people who choose not to participate in a study. This can be because your study is too long or not designed well, or because you're not accurately reaching the entire population that you're trying to study or the entire sample of the population that you're trying to study. So not everyone wants to or is able to respond to your study, creating a non-response bias. The other main category besides selection bias is measurement bias, which usually deals with inaccurate sampling or response bias. For an example of inaccurate sampling would be something like a health study that used a scale that has an inaccurate measurement of weight. If the way that you're collecting data does not use accurate tools or accurate measurements or scales, then your data is going to be biased because it's going to be inaccurate or wrong. Another form is response bias, which can happen when a question is worded strangely or in such a way that you are leading the respondent to a particular answer. This could be saying something like, "Don't you think our product is the best?" as opposed to, "Do you like our product?" or "Do you like or dislike?" Generally, response bias happens when a respondent feels like they are expected to respond or act in a certain way based on either the wording of the survey that they're taking or the actions or attitudes of the person observing them, depending on what kind of experiment or study you're doing. So, to sum up, bias is any systematic error that results in the collected data differing from the true population data. So, anything that causes the data from your study or experiment to be non-representative of your entire population, to be inaccurately representative of your entire population, is bias. And identifying bias in data collection is extremely important because if there's bias in your data collection, it can severely harm your chances of being able to use that data or being able to have accurate outcomes based on that data. And the two main types of bias that are generally discussed are selection bias and measurement bias or response bias. Selection bias generally results from non-representative sampling or from non-response bias, whereas measurement bias typically results from inaccurate sampling or a response bias. If you have any other questions, feel free to get in touch with me or another Chegg tutor. Thanks for watching.